Chapter 141, Written Test. Older villagers tended to take advantage of their seniority. In fact, this was why Yu Bing included the age requirements. The establishment of a new factory included the establishment of rules. She had to let the workers learn to obey management right from the beginning. Otherwise, she would have to spend time managing these people. As long as the first batch of employees could be managed according to the factory management system, even if they recruited older workers later, there wouldn't be any trouble. Yu Bing said calmly, "The factory has just been established, and many things are still in the process of being explored. Young people learn quickly, which helps the factory figure out the correct production model quickly. Only then can we gain a foothold and expand production." After these words, everyone quieted down. Yu Bing continued, "In the future, the factory will need to expand recruitment. I will relax the age limit, but there's one thing that won't change. All workers who enter the factory have to pass the written test." Yu Bing made this decision for the sake of the factory. The villagers weren't stupid. The factory was the village's industry. If the factory could do better, they could get more money at the end of the year. Moreover, everyone felt much better when they heard that they still had a chance. Most importantly, almost every family had people of this age. It didn't matter if they were old, as long as their sons, daughters, or daughters-in-law had a chance. Hence, everyone stopped protesting and hurriedly pulled their family members into the queue to sign up. Other than Feng Kai, Yu Yan and Yan Yan didn't sign up either. There was naturally no need to mention Feng Kai. He had already been appointed as the chief of the sales department. Although he was currently a general without an army, he was still a leader. As long as the factory performed well, it was only a matter of time before he had subordinates. The intellectuals were envious, but they couldn't do anything about it. After all, they couldn't give the factory the necessary machines like Feng Yan could. However, because of Feng Kai's example, the young people began to rack their brains to think of what benefits their family's connections could bring to the factory so that they could successfully become workers. Yu Yan couldn't take this lying down. She couldn't stand being led by Yu Bing. Putting aside her identity as Yu Bing's sister, submitting to Yu Bing and being controlled by Yu Bing was worse than asking her to farm. Yan Yan, on the other hand, was waiting for his mother to propose the idea of marriage to Yu Bing's parents. He had the intention of letting Yu Bing give him a management position, so he disdained signing up here. There were 187 applicants. They would participate in the written test 3 days after the registration deadline. In the past 3 days, the Yi Mountain Brigade had been in high spirits. At this time, most people had never officially attended school and had only attended literacy classes. They rarely read or write. As time passed, other than knowing how to write their name, because it involved getting work points, many people had forgotten how to write other words. Over the past few days, everyone had been asking each other questions and discussing as they worked. From time to time, they would gesture on the ground. The high learning atmosphere of the villagers made the intellectual youths especially nervous. They, who originally felt that they had the upper hand, suddenly lost their confidence. Every day, after work, they took out their textbooks from their previous studies and revised them attentively. Yu Bing was happy to hear this because it was getting closer and closer to the time the college entrance examination was resumed. Others might not know, but as someone who had experienced the future, she knew very well that once the policy to resume the college entrance examination was adopted, it meant that the entire country would undergo a tremendous change. She hoped that the intellectual youths of the Yi Mountain Brigade could seize the opportunity. The college entrance examination had been put on hold for 10 years. This meant that a large number of positions for high-level talents were completely vacant. This made the country crave talents to the extreme. Therefore, after the university students recruited through the college entrance examination 3 years ago graduated, they held very important positions in various departments of the country. It could be said that it was a chance for all scholars to turn things around. Yu Bing personally came up with an exam paper for this written test. The language arts section tested composition and grammar. They also had to write a small essay of about 100 words. The mathematics section tested addition and subtraction methods of numbers within 100 and the conversion of currency units. In fact, Yu Bing didn't have high expectations. As long as one could understand words and calculate, one could pass. Therefore, as long as one mastered basic knowledge points, one could pass. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. Chapter 142, Results. After the written test, there were still 135 applicants left. The competition was still very intense. Other than those who already had positions in the industrial chain project, Yu Yan and Yan Yan, who hadn't signed up, the remaining 60 people all entered the second round of the interview. The interview was arranged on the second day of the written test. The interviewers were Yu Bing, Zhao Lin, and Wu Jin. The female chefs who signed up were all villagers. Their job was to cook jam, so they were tested on their culinary skills. However, Yu Bing was more concerned about whether their clothes were clean and tidy, as well as some small habits when cooking. For example, many people would reach into the pot and pick up a vegetable to taste it. There were also those who didn't wash their hands before cooking. Whether the countertop was still clean after cooking was also part of the assessment. In the end, 5 young wives with good cooking skills and hygiene were chosen. The 2 disinfectants were in charge of operating the machine to disinfect the canned food. It involved mechanical operations and theoretical learning, so it mainly tested the candidate's memory and learning ability. When Feng Yin went to retrieve the machine, he specifically learned how to use and maintain the double-layer sterilization pot. During the interview, he was in charge of explaining the names and uses of the various parts of the machine. Whoever repeated it the most comprehensively would be chosen. In the end, the male intellectuals were chosen. As for the ordinary workers, they were all assigned to the mobility team. As the name suggested, they were flexible employees. They did whatever job needed to be done and helped out in the factory. This required the workers to cooperate well and be able to endure hardships. Of course, they also had to value cleanliness. After all, they were in the food industry, which had high hygiene requirements. This was also Yu Bing's basic requirement for the people working in the factory. 4 women and 3 men were chosen. Among them, 4 were intellectuals. Jiang Chun was also one of the chosen people. Then, Yu Bing chose a team leader from each of the 3 groups. Yu Bing's management of the factory was based on leadership accountability. The team leaders and section chiefs were directly responsible for reporting to Yu Bing. At the same time, they had to supervise the employees in their team. Once there was a problem, they would first find out which team had made a mistake. Then, Yu Bing would directly hold the relevant leaders accountable. As the factory director, Yu Bing was mainly responsible for the general development direction of the factory. She had to keep an eye on the sales and funds, the production plan, the quality control, and the work content of the various departments at every stage. How could she have so much time to pay attention to such trivial matters and the management of the grassroots employees? Yu Bing definitely wouldn't hold back when it came to delegating authority, but correspondingly, these small leaders who had enjoyed power had to shoulder the responsibility of managing employees and leading their team members to do their jobs well. The next morning, Yu Bing finished writing the recruitment results in the office and prepared to go out to post them. When everyone saw Yu Bing come out, they greeted her warmly. Yu Bing smiled and replied to them one by one. Then, she pasted the list on the factory wall. When everyone saw the name list, they realized that about half of the people in this round of recruitment were intellectuals. The villagers were furious. The more enthusiastic everyone was just now, the more indignant they were now. This is the village's industry. Why should intellectuals take up so many of our spots? A hoarse female voice sounded. Yu Bing felt that the voice was a little familiar. Before Yu Bing could find the source, the remaining villagers began to voice their dissatisfaction loudly. That's right. Even if it's just according to the proportions of the number of villagers and intellectuals in the village, the intellectuals shouldn't account for so many people. Yu Bing, are you biased towards your own people? Yu Bing, even if you're an intellectual yourself, you can't give all the spots to your people so blatantly. I already said that the written test was held to eliminate us. As for the age limit, I think it's just to make way for those intellectuals. That's not fair. We protest this list. Yes, we want to protest. Objection. The villagers began to shout in unison. When the final list of people was confirmed yesterday, Yu Bing had already expected today's situation. Yu Bing expected that there would be villagers who were unconvinced and caused trouble, but she had a clear conscience, so she shouted, "Everyone, calm down and listen to me first. Don't listen to her. She must be trying to find an excuse to deceive us again. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much." Chapter 143, Debt Ridden. Yu Bing quickly looked at the crowd and realized that Li Ping was avoiding her gaze. She knew that Li Ping was definitely involved in this matter. Yu Bing's voice was drowned out by everyone's angry shouts. There was also someone deliberately causing trouble by fanning the flames, so the villagers continued to shout in protest. Seeing this, Yu Bing turned around and said a few words to Jiang Chun. Jiang Chun ran into the factory. In fact, when this result came out, the intellectuals felt that Yu Bing was biased towards them. However, no matter what, Yu Bing was being blamed because of them now, so they silently surrounded Yu Bing, thinking that if the villagers became agitated and attacked Yu Bing directly, they could stop them. Although the intellectual youths had good intentions, this undoubtedly made the villagers even more certain that Yu Bing was biased and unfair. It also made the relationship between the villagers and the intellectual youths more estranged. Everyone began to condemn Yu Bing even more fiercely. This industrial chain belongs to our village. The village chief should have chosen the person in charge from among the villagers. Why should you be the one in charge? These words had a domino effect. Many people didn't care about this at first. After all, they all felt that even if Yu Bing didn't become the person in charge, they wouldn't either. However, it was different now. They felt that they had suffered unfair treatment, so after someone suggested it, this matter became an excuse for them to condemn Yu Bing and force her to compromise. However, there were people in the crowd who knew the inside story. I heard that this industrial chain was proposed by Yu Bing, so they made her the person in charge. With someone speaking up for Yu Bing, a small group of villagers voiced their belief in Yu Bing's capabilities. Therefore, there was no longer a problem with her being the person in charge. They only had doubts about the recruitment results this time. However, those who believed in Yu Bing were in the minority. Most of them were still unconvinced. At this moment, Jiang Chun carried a loudspeaker from the factory and walked to Yu Bing's side with a stool in one hand. Then, she quietly crawled out from the side. Yu Bing took the loudspeaker and stepped on the stool. Then, she said firmly, "I've heard everyone's doubts. Now, I hope you can all calm down and let me tell you guys why." Let her talk. Let's hear what she says. All right, we'll let you talk. If you don't satisfy us, we'll report you. If the village doesn't care, we'll look for the commune. If the commune doesn't care, we'll look for the county. Then, everyone finally quietened down. Yu Bing picked up the loudspeaker again. Villagers. Intellectuals. What I'm going to say next is what I want to say to all of you. I've never thought that the locals of the He Mountain Brigade are on opposing sides of those of us who came from the city to the countryside to support the construction, but I know many of you don't think so. The villagers have an advantage in terms of planting, but in terms of cultural foundation and learning ability, the intellectuals have an advantage. These advantages should be complementary, not opposing. We should be united. It's not easy to start a factory. From the establishment of the factory to purchasing the necessary equipment, to organizing the recruitment of people to produce it, to the sales problem after the finished product is produced, all of this is complicated. If our factory wants to develop, the most important thing is to survive first. The abilities of intellectuals can more effectively help the factory increase its survival rate. Why? Because they have more connections and better knowledge. They can sell the products in the factory to the county and the city. I believe that the furthest place many villagers have been to is only the county city. I also believe that if I give you guys a chance, you will grow up, but our factory can't afford to wait. Everyone saw the village's account book at the end of last year. It's only 1,200 yuan, but look at our project. There are more than 10,000 tree seedlings planted in the orchard, a farm, and a fish pond. Do you think the money in the village's account can really carry out these projects? No one had ever calculated this before. When they heard Yu Bing's words, they fell into deep thought. The current disinfection equipment in the factory is from the intellectual Feng Kai. Through his family's connections, he obtained a discount and the Mountain Brigade was able to buy it on credit. The Mountain Brigade is now in debt. Do you know why Mr. Bai came to oversee our project? Because even a high-ranking person like him heard of our village's reputation of borrowing money everywhere. That's why he came to take a look. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. Chapter 144, Clear Conscience. Just as Yu Bing had said, no matter how one looked at it, the village's industrial chain exceeded the fund balance on the account. Although the villagers didn't say it, they were aware. Now that Yu Bing had directly exposed it, they couldn't play dumb anymore and could only face it head-on. Yu Bing saw everyone's silence and knew that she had to take this opportunity to completely convince these people. Otherwise, wouldn't she be exhausted if they caused trouble every other day? The first batch of workers in the factory is very important. This will affect whether the factory can gain a foothold or not. I have to ensure that the people chosen are the best. Only then can the factory operate faster and obtain funds to ensure the virtuous operation of the factory. As the vanguards, the intellectuals are under even more pressure. I hope that before you all cause trouble, you remember one thing. You differentiate between your own people and outsiders, but you seem to have omitted something. After intellectuals come to the countryside, their household registration is also in the countryside. Everyone's goal should be the same, and that is to hope that the He Mountain Brigade will get better and better. Moreover, the factory is a collective economic project in the village, and the benefits generated are also collectively owned. Only when the factory earns money can everyone truly benefit. Therefore, I'll choose whoever can do the jobs the best and bring the greatest benefits to the factory. Only when the factory is stable can it bring more dividends to everyone at the end of the year. Only then can it steadily expand and create more jobs for more people. Villagers, Yu Bing, have no selfish motives towards the people I recruited, and I have a clear conscience. Alright, that's all I want to say. If you're unhappy and want to report me, so be it. Everything I do can withstand tests and investigations. At this moment, everyone felt a little embarrassed when they heard this. Yu Bing was loyal to the public, but not only did they not appreciate her kindness, but they also came to cause trouble. They were too short-sighted. When Li Ping, who was in the crowd, saw that Yu Bing had actually turned the situation around, she was furious. Her eyes darted around, and she no longer hid herself. She looked straight at Yu Bing as she said loudly, "We villagers can also learn the knowledge that the intellectuals have. You said that the current situation can't wait for us to grow, but what makes you assume that we have to take so long to learn? You're just prejudiced against villagers." As soon as she said this, a small group of people agreed. Yu Bing stared at Li Ping coldly. Just as she was about to speak, she was interrupted by a voice. "Let me uphold justice." When everyone heard Wu Jin's voice behind them, they made way. Wu Jin walked forward with a few people. "Someone has already told me what happened just now. Firstly, you're questioning the unfairness of this selection, and secondly, you're questioning Yu Bing's ability. Then I'll tell you the actual results now." With that, he called the few people he had brought over. They were all villagers who were going to the county to participate in training. As long as there were 2 matching spots in the factory, Yu Bing arranged a villager and an intellectual. Firstly, it was to appease the villagers, and secondly, she was worried that there would be a return policy in 2 years. If the intellectuals wanted to return to the city, it would be terrible if the technical talents of the project all left. I was sent to the pesticide factory. It involves chemistry knowledge. I only know a little because I went to junior high school. However, compared to the young people who went to training with me, my learning progress is still far inferior. Knowledge takes time to accumulate and can't be mastered overnight. It's a fact that the education system in the countryside is not as good as the cities, and it's also a fact that the intellectuals can complete their training faster and better. The staff arrangements made by the factory director are all for the sake of the better development of these industries in the village. I was sent to the Agriculture Bureau. I can prove this. I can also prove it. The villagers who had participated in the training all spoke up and explained. Seeing this, the villagers no longer suspected anything. However, this wasn't the end. Wu Jin suppressed his anger and glanced around as he continued in a low voice, "I'll tell everyone clearly now that the ecological industry chain in the village was proposed by Yu Bing. Our village was able to get a bank loan because of Yu Bing, so she's undoubtedly the best candidate to be the person in charge. If you're unconvinced, come up with a better plan than the current one and try to get a loan the money from the bank. Then, I can also let you be the overall person in charge. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much." Chapter 145, Hot Potato. Previously, only some people knew about this. Now that Wu Jin had said it in public, everyone finally realized Yu Bing's strength. None of them dared to say anything else. They also realized that if they angered Yu Bing and she quit, they wouldn't be able to do these projects. Most importantly, this was a debt-ridden project. Before paying off the debt, this project was like a hot potato. Ordinary people couldn't accept it and didn't want to accept it. In the end, the matter was resolved peacefully, so Li Ping could only leave with the crowd indignantly. Ever since Sun Wang became disgraced, the Sun family kept a low profile. Only Li Ping would occasionally try to stir up trouble. However, without her backer and her son, all she usually did was say some mean things out of envy. She couldn't cause much trouble in the village. Yu Bing couldn't be bothered to waste time on this clown. After all, she was very busy now. During this round of recruitment, the intellectuals were especially proactive in showing off their skills and family connections in hopes that Yu Bing would take a fancy to any of them. This was their chance. A girl called Shuya caught Yu Bing's eye because she was good at drawing. When Shuya was working in the field, she was called to the field by Tianjing. "Captain Yu is looking for you. Please go to the factory." Shuya's heart thumped. She had a feeling that this might have something to do with the information form she went to sign up for. The factory would only start work in April after the cherries were picked. Yu Bing was the only one in the factory now. There was a large desk and a few chairs against the wall in the warehouse as a temporary office. Yu Bing looked at Shuya and asked with a smile, "I saw that your application information said that you know how to draw. Then do you know how to design trademarks?" Shuya lowered her eyes and hesitated for a moment. Then, she looked at Yu Bing and said firmly, "Captain Yu, to be honest, I've never designed trademarks before, but I hope you can give me a chance. If you have any requests, feel free to ask. I'll definitely design it to your satisfaction." Yu Bing knew that these intellectuals had been doing farm work for so many years and yearned for the knowledge they had learned to be put to use in an important position, so she comforted her. "Don't worry, I'll definitely give you an opportunity. Our factory doesn't have a trademark yet. Help me design a simple, classy, and discernible trademark. It's best if it's novel. When Shuya heard this, she immediately smiled and said, "All right, Captain Yu, I'll give you the design plan tomorrow." It was only the middle of March, so there was still time. Yu Bing smiled and said, "There's no hurry. Give it to me after you've designed it. You just have to submit the draft in 3 days." Shuya nodded vigorously. When she went back to do farm work, she felt more energetic. After work, Shuya locked herself in the dormitory and began to draw. She didn't even want to eat. When she was truly starving, she took out biscuits and ate 2 pieces. This was the 5th year since Shuya left the countryside. She no longer had any hopes of returning to the city. She was 23 years old this year and was old enough to get married in the city. From the end of last year, she had the idea of marrying a villager and taking root in the countryside. However, she was still a little indignant. Shuya's family was a scholarly family. Most of her ancestors were teachers. If not for this vigorous campaign to support the construction of the countryside, she would have become a teacher like her parents. This had been her goal and dream since she was young, but now, she could only do farm work. In the first year, she was still looking forward to returning to the city. In the second year, she began to have a mental breakdown. In the third year, she was completely devastated. In the fourth year, she accepted it. Now, it was the 5th year. She felt numb to the tedious lifestyle she had lived for so many years. When Yu Bing first became the captain of the team of intellectuals, Shuya didn't care at all because this had nothing to do with her life. She still had to go to the field every day. It wasn't until the start of the industrial chain that Shuya had a feeling that there might be a big change in the Yi Mountain Brigade. Fonkai didn't hide the fact that he could enter the factory as long as he helped the factory settle things. Shuya became filled with anger at that moment. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. Chapter 146, Trademark Design. At this moment, Shuya, who was creating, felt a burst of inspiration. The knowledge she had suppressed for so many years was released at this moment. She drew tirelessly under the kerosene lamp until 4 in the morning before she was finally willing to stop. Every time she finished a drawing, she would suddenly have new ideas. Hence, she drew a few designs and finally chose 3 works that she was most satisfied with before going to bed. Perhaps because she was too excited, Shuya couldn't fall asleep. When the sky lit up and people started to get up, she hurriedly washed up and rushed to Yu Bing's door excitedly. Because she was worried that Yu Bing wasn't up yet, she didn't knock. She stood outside the door and waited. She even practiced smiling. She had to give Yu Bing a good image of someone diligent and responsible. After about half an hour, the door opened. As soon as Yu Bing opened the door, she was startled by the figure that suddenly appeared outside the door. When she saw that it was Shuya, she heaved a sigh of relief. "Shuya, you scared me." Seeing this, Shuya hurriedly frowned and apologized nervously. "Captain Yu. I'm sorry. I just wanted to show you my design as soon as possible. I didn't expect to scare you." Yu Bing came back to her senses and waved her hand with a smile. "It's fine. I just didn't react in time." She looked at the blueprint in Shuya's hand and said in surprise, "You finished drawing so quickly?" Shuya immediately handed over the design draft. "Yes, I drew it last night. I wanted you to see it first. If you're not satisfied, I can modify it at any time. I don't want to delay the factory's printing time." Seeing Shuya's enthusiastic attitude, Yu Bing naturally wouldn't refuse. She started looking at the design draft at the door. Yu Bing was someone who had experienced the future, so she had seen many trademarks and creative ideas, but the aesthetics of the current era were different from those of the future. People might not like the design concepts of the future, so she didn't mention them to Shuya. However, Shuya's design also made Yu Bing's eyes light up in amazement. Yu Bing nodded in satisfaction and looked at Shuya with certainty. "Your design is very creative. It's settled then. You and I will go to the village committee and tell the village staff. We'll have a meeting to discuss it." When Shuya heard this, her eyes lit up. The village council office. Shuya passed down the design draft and stood in front of the blackboard as she gazed at the village staff sitting around the conference table. She suddenly felt a little excited. It felt just like when she was called on stage by a teacher to explain her solution. Every time this happened, she felt like a teacher. Seeing Yu Bing's encouraging smile, Shuya nodded firmly at Yu Bing and began to talk about her design ideas. Shuya designed a total of 3 models. One was a simple drawing of a gluttonous child. Beside it was the word delicious. The second model focused on words and used words to piece together the child's gluttonous expression. The last model was the most direct. It was a thumbs-up gesture with the factory name below. The focus of this design was that the thumb was deliberately enlarged, imperceptibly strengthening the senses, as if hinting that the food of this brand was especially delicious. Shuya even thoughtfully made a promotional slogan for the food factory. Love delicious. It only takes a second. This was the first time everyone had seen such a trademark. They felt that it was very novel, mainly because it matched the aesthetics of the people of this era and was creative. The slogan was also catchy, so Shuya received everyone's unanimous affirmation. I have an idea. These three types are too difficult to choose from, so can you integrate them? For example, the child in the first design will give the third type a thumbs up, and how about changing the word delicious in the first design to the words in the second design? Everyone agreed with this village official's idea. Everyone looked at Shuya. When Shuya heard this suggestion, she disagreed, and a conflicted expression appeared on her face. When Yubing heard this suggestion, she knew that it was a bad idea and knew the reason why Shuya was unwilling to accept it. However, she wanted to see if Shuya would choose to listen or stick to her guns. After all, if she listened to the leader, the plan would definitely be approved. However, knowing that the effect wouldn't be as good, it was especially important to adhere to professional judgment. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. Chapter 147, Dilemma. After a short internal struggle, Shuya chose to say her true thoughts. Leaders, sometimes, 1 + 1 might be less than 2. If all the good points are used on a single trademark, it will seem too complicated and it won't be as pleasing aesthetics-wise as the simple-looking one. When everyone heard this, they were baffled. Why did good things become bad when added together? At this moment, Yubing stood up. Trademarks are the same as brands. What's important is that they should be simple and easy to remember. Overly complicated patterns will distract consumers. Everyone's memory points are limited. Moreover, if they're too complicated, other manufacturers will take advantage of the situation to copy our design. For example, if the other party's design is a child wearing an inconspicuous hat, consumers won't pay attention to such details at first glance. They might think that it is our brand and buy it without a second thought. These were all actual cases that happened in the future. The previous explanations were from a professional perspective. Many people might not be able to understand it, but after hearing Yubing's example, they understood clearly. Anyone with a brain wouldn't do such a thing. Hence, everyone was convinced. In the end, they decided on the design with a thumbs up. Yubing once again promoted her principle of choosing the most simple design to everyone. Shuya returned to the field. The young people who knew that Shuya had helped the factory create designs quickly asked about the results. After knowing that the design was chosen, they were very happy for her. Yuyin also heard them and asked, seeing how happy you are, Yubing agreed to let you into the factory? Shuya smiled and replied, I'm happy because my knowledge was able to help the village. Captain Yu didn't say anything about me entering the factory. Since the factory's trademark doesn't have to be changed often, she probably only asked me to help design it as a one-time favor. It's not a big deal. When Yuyin heard this, she sneered and mocked, isn't that letting people work without compensation? Some people could tell that Yuyin was always looking for trouble with Yubing, so they said with dissatisfaction, don't be so utilitarian. Captain Yu is our superior, so how can we disobey her? If this factory is run well, we will get bonuses at the end of the year. Whether it's for public or private reasons, we should help when needed and not be so fussy about personal gains and losses. That's right. Captain Yu is such a capable person. If she can showcase her capabilities in front of her, if there are more opportunities in the future, she will think of her. What a good opportunity to perform. As they spoke, the topic shifted to how capable Yubing was. Seeing everyone's admiration for Yubing, Yuyin was furious. Yubing? What was so impressive about her? If she had been raised in her biological parents' home since she was young, she would definitely be more outstanding than Yubing. At the thought of this, she blamed her adoptive parents for not nurturing her. After the food factory's trademark was confirmed, Yubing planned to go to the county to contact the sugar factory to supply sugar. She also had to place orders for the glass bottles in advance. Wu Jin stopped her and used the excuse that it wasn't safe to bring money alone to signal Yubing to bring Xiaoxing along. Yubing felt that it was faster to go there alone. However, Wu Jin stuffed Xiaoxing into the car. Yubing had no choice but to bring Xiaoxing to the county city. Yubing was very puzzled. What's going on? Xiaoxing sighed softly. Uncle Jin hopes that I'll stop selling things in the black market and will help you in the factory. When Yubing heard this, she suddenly turned to look at Xiaoxing with widened eyes. The village chief knows that we're doing this? Xiaoxing looked at the car that had gone astray and hurriedly reached out to turn the steering wheel. Watch the road! Watch the road! Yubing came back to her senses and looked ahead. Xiaoxing said, he only knows about my involvement. He doesn't know that you're also involved. Yu Bing heaved a sigh of relief, but then she thought of Xiao Li's eyes. Then what do you think? Xiaoxing leaned against the back of the chair and looked at the road as he replied, I haven't thought about it yet. The last time I went to deliver, Brother Chang also mentioned to me about picking up the county's black market. Of course, Yu Bing knew Xiaoxing's dilemma. After all, the government policy still didn't allow private business dealings. There were still a few years before the reform and opening up, so it was indeed very dangerous to take over the black market. If something happened, it would be a problem for Xiaoxing's two siblings to survive. But if he didn't continue, then Xiao Li's eyes. Yu Bing sighed. What a dilemma. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. Chapter 148, Choice. Considering the food factory, Yu Bing thought for a moment and said, why don't you wait another month or two? Let's see how the food factory does. If we can expand production in the future, I plan to give you a commission from the sales department, such as a 0.1 yuan commission from selling 10 bottles. If the business expands, the salary will be quite high. Moreover, there's also our private extra income. Although we've been selling what we made ourselves, it's still a small matter compared to taking over Brother Chang's position. You might not even be able to survive if you're caught. Yu Bing's tone carried a hint of worry. Of course, Xiaoxing knew the danger, so he had to think about it carefully. I know what you mean. I'll think about it again. The two of them arrived at the county city in silence. Because Xiaoxing often bought raw materials, he was very familiar with this area. He placed an order of 20,000 yuan with the glass factory. Because of Xiaoxing's reputation, he was allowed to only pay half the deposit and pay the rest after receiving the goods. Then, Yu Bing took the trademark and went to the Commerce Bureau to file it. If she didn't file the trademark and it was stolen, it would be difficult to explain things. Yu Bing attached great importance to copyrights. Then, she took a sample of the glass bottle to the paper factory and asked someone to set the logo to a suitable size to produce stickers. Then, she prepared to return to the village to buy the raw materials. This time, she paid on the spot and returned to the village. Everything was ready in the factory. When the fruits ripened and the factory started operating, Feng Kai mentioned his uncle's requests to Yu Bing. If it was just ordinary employee benefits, they could just send the canned fruits. However, Feng Kai's uncle planned to give the employees a holiday gift during the Dragon Boat Festival, so they had to be more particular. Yu Bing thought of the bamboo weaving skills of the villagers, so she brought a few empty glass bottles and went to look for Xiao Li. After leaving the Xiao family's house, Yu Bing called Shuya over again and asked her to make a sticker design with the words Dragon Boat Festival according to the specification of 10 centimeters in diameter and 5 centimeters in width. She had to add the elements of the Dragon Boat Festival and let people see the cherries. It was soon April. Every fruit tree team sent at least half of their team to the cherry garden to pick ripe cherries. Yu Bing divided the 30 people into two groups. 20 people were in charge of picking and 10 people were in charge of transporting them to the food factory and washing them. As for the ordinary workers in the food factory, they were in charge of removing the washed cherries' fruit cores. The cooking process was assigned to the chef team. The chefs placed all the cherries in a large vat and marinated them with white sugar for the night. They only began to boil them the next day. At this moment, they added sugar and lemon juice. After boiling them to make them thicken, the chefs and ordinary workers placed the jam into a glass bottle and finally entered the disinfection room. When the first batch of samples came out, the jam was 500 grams a bottle. Yu Bing immediately separated them into ordinary and gift box versions. Feng Kai was pleasantly surprised when he saw the two versions in front of him. In this day and age, packaging was very scarce. After all, it was already good enough to have food to eat. Who would want to focus on external packaging? Therefore, Shinji's description referred to the color of the jam. He didn't want any hair or impurities in them. It was just that Yu Bing thought of more details. In the future, it would be a market economy. In order to sell goods, there would be endless innovations in promotional methods and packaging design. Yu Bing was a merchant who experienced intense commercial competition after all. These ideas were at her fingertips. In order to keep a low profile and not seem too futuristic, she had only displayed a little bit of her creativeness. Ordinary clothes weren't seasonal. Many of the gifts given to workers by factories had the factory's logo. However, Yu Bing included a small design. In the glass lid and the concave area of the bottle, she asked Xiao Li to make a circle with bamboo and tie it tightly so it could be handheld. With a handheld design, it was very convenient for consumers to take it home. They didn't have to find a bag to store it, which made it different from ordinary glass canned food from other companies. Just this design alone could make the products from their factory stand out. The gift box was a rectangular bamboo basket. The front of the bamboo basket was pasted with a Dragon Boat Festival sticker designed by Shuya. There were 2 large cherry jam jar designs on the small dragon boat. The brand name was written below, and the Dragon Boat Festival blessings were on the right. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. Chapter 149, Choice. Once this design was introduced, Phong Kai felt more confident in promoting it to those unfamiliar companies. Phong Kai said excitedly, Captain Yu. If we sell it in this packaging, I dare to say that no factory can compare to us. Even the packaging is so convenient and creative. This time, I want to take out more samples to promote them to other units. Yu Bing smiled and encouraged, no problem. Take 10 bottles of samples. I'll bring you to Mr. Wu to get permission to drive to City H. When they arrived at the village committee, everyone sat down to discuss the price of canned cherries. Mr. Wei took out his small account book and calculated it for everyone. In the end, the cost of production was 1.15 yuan per bottle. However, with the packaging, the ordinary version's price was 1.152 yuan, and the gift box version's price was 1.16 yuan. If freight costs were added, each bottle would cost an additional 0.2 yuan. In the end, the ordinary version was priced at 1.6 yuan per bottle, and the gift box version was priced at 3.42 yuan per 2 bottles. After the price was determined, Phong Kai immediately took the approval slip and went to the city to negotiate orders. Yu Bing prepared to go to the county's market. The first stop was the county government. After all, it was a pilot project approved by Mr. Bai. It would be a waste not to use this connection. In the county government office building. To go to the county head's office, one had to pass through the secretary's office first. There were 2 staff members in the secretary's office. Wang Wei was among them. Yu Bing didn't go forward to greet Wang Wei. She just knocked on the door like an ordinary staff member. Hello, I'm Yu Bing, the person in charge of the food processing plant of the Mountain Brigade. I want to make an appointment with Mr. Bai to report on the progress of the project. The other clerk was closer to the door and replied in a businesslike tone, Hello, Mr. Yu. Please register. I'll help you arrange the time. Wang Wei walked forward and said with a smile, Secretary Li, this is my sister. Please help arrange an earlier time. Secretary Li immediately revealed an understanding expression and smiled. So she's one of us. No problem. This test is a project that the county head is concerned about. It should be ranked top priority. Wang Wei thanked her and brought Yu Bing out of the office. Yu Bing asked worriedly, Brother Wang Wei, will this affect your reputation? Wang Wei replied nonchalantly, It's fine. Instead of sneaking around and letting others discover it, it's better to expose the relationship myself. We're not afraid of investigation. Moreover, Mr. Bai only chooses the best. You relied on your strength to get to this position. The scale of the project has nothing to do with me. Besides, the county head is indeed very attentive to your experimental unit. Even if I didn't tell Secretary Li just now, the county head definitely would have given you priority when he saw your appointment. Only then did Yu Bing feel relieved. The competitive relationship between the colleagues in the office was very strong. Wang Wei was Mr. Bai's right-hand man. Whether it was the convenience the food factory was currently receiving or buying things on credit, she was afraid that someone would blame Wang Wei and say that he was using his position to profit for his family. Wang Wei asked with concern, You're not here this time just to report your progress, are you? Did you encounter some trouble? Yu Bing looked at Wang Wei and smiled. I'm just reporting the progress. Most importantly, I came to discuss business. Wang Wei thought for a moment and raised his eyebrows. You're here to ask Mr. Bai for an order, right? After being seen through at a glance, Yu Bing admitted frankly, that's right. After all, we're also an experimental unit. We hope that Mr. Bai will help give us a good start. Wang Wei nodded with a smile. He looked at the corridor and realized that no one was around. Then, he whispered, That's a good reason. However, if you want Mr. Bai to place an order, this isn't enough. It's best if you can earn more income from the village and expand the recruitment. After all, Mr. Bai wants to solve the unemployment problem and the poverty in the village. After Yu Bing contemplated it, she said, Thank you, Brother Wang Wei. Seeing this, Wang Wei didn't say anything else. Then sit on the stool in the corridor and wait. I'll go back to the office first. More than half an hour later, Secretary Li brought Yu Bing into the county head's office. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. Chapter 150, Process. Yu Bing smiled and walked to Mr. Bai's desk. Hello, Mr. Bai. I'm here to report the progress to you. Mr. Bai wasn't someone who liked to speak in a bureaucratic tone. He pointed at the stool in front of the table and said, "Looks like you guys are already on the right track in all aspects. Let's talk." Yu Bing first reported that the orchard had been planted and the cherries were being picked and sent to the factory for production. "Mr. Bai, the first batch of jam has been produced in our factory. You're welcome to go inspect in the near future." Mr. Bai was very happy to hear that the factory had started production. "Sure. How are the other results of your industry chain?" Yu Bing wasn't in a hurry to promote. She continued to report, "Mr. Wu has just finished buying fish seedlings and is preparing to throw them into the fish pond at the end of the month. The duck seedlings are expected to be bred in June, but a third of our hens have started laying eggs this month. Currently, the farm is choosing fertilized eggs that can continue to hatch." When Mr. Bai heard that the Yi Mountain Brigade wanted to go all out on credit, his smile stiffened. He skipped over the topic, since he was afraid that he would be asked for more funds if he asked any more questions. He changed the topic to the factory. "Is your food factory only planning to process the raw materials it produces?" Yu Bing replied, "For now, that's the case. However, after producing the jam, we'll make the subsequent production arrangements according to the repayment situation. After all, the investment is large in all aspects. What's more important now is to open up sales channels." After Yu Bing finished speaking, she calmly took out a sample from her backpack and smiled at Mr. Bai. "Mr. Bai, this is the first batch of jam from our delicious food factory. I specifically brought it for you to see." As Mr. Bai looked at the two completely different packagings, he was immediately intrigued by the unique design. "Is this a packaging you specifically designed for the Dragon Boat Festival?" Eye-catching packaging accounted for half of the success. Yu Bing eagerly explained the design concept of the two packages. Mr. Bai nodded. "You young people are so creative. This idea is not bad." Seeing this, Yu Bing took out a lunchbox with a few clean spoons. She took out a spoon and scooped a spoonful of jam before handing it to Mr. Bai. "Mr. Bai, try it." Mr. Bai looked at the colorful jam and took the spoon to smell it first. After eating half a spoonful, he said, "The cherry taste is very strong. It melts in your mouth. It's sour, sweet, and tasty. Not bad. The color and scent are enticing." Yu Bing immediately said, "Mr. Bai, the Dragon Boat Festival is coming soon. If it's so delicious, your unit can order a batch." Mr. Bai was savoring the taste of the jam when he heard this. His expression froze and he cleared his throat before saying, "Little Yu, the government has the government's procurement process. It's not up to me to decide. You have to go to the procurement department to sign up and go through the normal process." With that, he quickly finished the remaining half spoonful in one bite, since he was afraid that Yu Bing would take away the half spoonful of jam because he didn't help. How could Yu Bing not know that she had to report to the procurement department? However, the smaller the place, the more important connections were. There were at least 10 to 20 food lists reported by the procurement department. She didn't know anyone from the procurement department, and she didn't want to use the Wang family's help anymore because favors were the hardest to repay. Yu Bing wasn't so selfless as to keep using her personal connections for the sake of the factory. Besides, the Yi Mountain Brigade's project was also the county head's focus of attention. If she didn't make good use of it, she would be letting down the factory's reputation as an experimental unit. Thinking of Wang Wei's words, Yu Bing continued, "Mr. Bai, this is an experimental unit personally approved by you. I won't say anything else. Our factory has just been established and no one has heard of our brand. You have to help us at this critical time. We'll use the funds from this batch of jam sales to continue the next round of production. We'll also use this opportunity to promote the food factory." Yu Bing planned to sell this batch of jam to various units. She wanted to use the word-of-mouth advertisement method through the unit's purchases before negotiating with the supply company. After all, only after everyone knew this brand would they have the urge to buy it in stores. These days, no one was rich. No one was willing to spend money to buy a bottle of jam from an unknown brand. Therefore, when Mr. Bai heard Yu Bing's sales plan, his expression softened slightly. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much.